Do you think we need a theme song?
Maybe.
Well, I feel like most podcasts have theme songs.
Yeah, or at least some kind of sting at the beginning, like do 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 do.
Yeah,
This
we have
pause
the
it for
little like
me.
tape being put into the tape machine thing.
That's something.
Yeah, I'm not very musically oriented, but
No.
anyway, welcome to
We've
Pause It
done
For Me.
something. Yeah, welcome to Pause It For Me.
Today we're going to be taking a look at the epic of 1939, Gone with the Wind. And I'll warn you up front, I'm going to be reading quite a bit in this episode, at least front loading it with
Interesting.
reading. Because
you had just talked about how you wanted to keep it casual and conversational.
yeah, well, I got to set the scene in
Okay.
order for to be
Fair
casual
enough.
and conversational.
Yeah,
So,
I hear you.
I normally just read the log line and then later get into some trivia, but I'm going to read like a hefty portion of the Wikipedia article
That's
to really set the scene on this film's legacy. For a specific reason, because going into this, I knew basically nothing about it.
Oh, really?
We touched on this at the end of the last episode. You told me that it involved slavery.
Yeah.
From the white people's perspectives.
Yep.
From the slave owners' perspectives.
Yep.
And then other than that, I knew from film school that it was a very expensive movie.
It certainly was.
A very grandiose movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they showed us that one shot of the sort of like the crane shot where you see all the extras lying in the aftermath
In Atlanta,
of
yeah.
the war, yeah.
And Scarlett's walking amongst the dead bodies.
Yeah. But that was it. So
Yeah.
even going into this, I was like, I know that this film exists, but why is it on the list of like important cultural film landmarks? So for
Yeah.
you audience listeners out there, if you don't know anything about Gone with the Wind, I'm going to set the scene for you. So, according to Wikipedia, Gone with the Wind is a 1939 American epic historical romance film adapted from the 1936 novel by Margaret Mitchell. The film was produced by David O. Selznick of Selznick International Pictures and directed by Victor Fleming. Set in the American South against the backdrop of the American Civil War and the Reconstruction era, the film tells the story of Scarlett O'Hara, played by Vivian Leigh, the strong-willed daughter of a Georgia plantation owner, following her romantic pursuit of Ashley Wilkes, played by Leslie Howard, who is married to his cousin, Melanie Hamilton, played by Olivia de Havilland. Best shot at pronouncing that.
Yep.
And her subsequent marriage to Rhett Butler, played by Clark Gable.
Yeah.
Now, continuing forward just a little bit. It received generally positive reviews upon its release in December 1939. The casting was widely praised, but its long running time received criticism. It's like 4 hours. At the 12th Academy Awards, it received 10 Academy Awards, 8 competitive, 2 honorary, from 13 nominations, including wins for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Actress, and Best Supporting Actress for Hattie McDaniel, becoming the first African-American to win an Academy Award.
Woo! She was good in it.
It set records for the total number of wins and nominations at the time. Gone with the Wind was immensely popular when it first released. It became the highest-earning film made up to that point and held the record for over a quarter of a century. When adjusted for monetary inflation, it is still the highest-grossing film in history.
Wow.
It re-released,
proportionally, I guess.
Yeah, it re-released periodically throughout the 20th century and became ingrained in popular culture. Although the film has been criticized as historical negationism, glorifying slavery and the lost cause of the Confederacy myth, it has been credited with triggering changes in the way in which African Americans were depicted cinematically. The film is regarded as one of the greatest films of all time, and in 1989, it became one of the 25 inaugural films selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry.
Mm-hmm.
So that is our baseline for this movie.
Yeah.
It's a big movie.
It's definitely a controversial movie for good reason, but we have to think about when it was released and what the culture environment was back then. In 1938, there was still segregation. So, we need to, we're not condoning any of the behavior that is depicted in this film, but I think critically we need to look at it as if we were an audience of that time period. And I think there is a lot to like about this movie, but obviously there's a lot of eye rolling and just negative things that we'll have to talk about because it is certainly not perfect. I think it is still worthy of being like taught, shown in schools, being critiqued, because I think there's a lot of interesting stuff there, but there's also a lot of stuff that we can learn from the bad experiences and stuff. So I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on the movie.
Well, in classic Posit For Me fashion, we have not talked about it
Yeah.
since finishing the film. In fact, you left the house almost as soon as it ended because you had to go to work.
Yeah. So the screen popped up where it said exit, and I was like, that's my cue to leave.
So I set the scene for the movie. Now I'll set the scene more so from my knowledge. I've never been much of a history buff.
No.
Especially when it comes to politics.
You know,
or
like
wars.
nothing about politics.
So somewhat embarrassingly, I really did not know what the Civil War was about until watching this movie.
Well, that was Abraham Lincoln's like whole deal, was that he was an abolitionist, and that was like his big platform thing.
I knew that much. Yeah.
That they were trying to prevent the spread of slavery being legal in the South, and by that accord, eventually it like becoming extinct, and like putting in different things to get slaves to be freed by their masters or limit slavery stuff. And the South was like, no, a lot of our money is made from cotton picking, where we have free labor that we abuse. So we don't want to do that. And Abraham Lincoln, you're not going to care for our Southern rights. So we're going to secede, and we're going to fight you because we want to keep being rich people that abuse people that are different colors than us.
Right.
Color of skin.
So in that regard, very informative and interesting. I recognize that obviously the point of view represented for the Civil War in this film is extremely biased.
And it's revisionist.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's only showing Black people as like, for the most part, either being kind of dumb or caricaturized, or being loyal to the white people even after they were freed, like Mammy.
Right. So, all that said, going into this, didn't expect much story-wise, but you and I both were dreading it.
Oh, yeah, because it was like 4 hours.
Neither of us wanted to watch a 4-hour movie. And it's been like weeks of putting it off because we didn't want to watch it.
Well, and it was apprehensive because I knew it was about, you know, the perspective of white, rich, privileged people that think it's okay to own someone.
Now, so when it comes to that, I'll say up front, I have mixed opinions about this.
Yeah, I agree.
I want to be able to say, oh, it was really good, or oh, it was really bad, but I can't really. So for starters, I was having a bit of a Joey Tribbiani moment at the very beginning.
Okay.
When she was
talking,
when she was like, oh, I wanted to marry Ashley. I thought Ashley only loved me. I was like, hold the phone. Are we having like a gay couple relationship in like the 1850s, 60s? That can't be right. But no, very quickly it dawned on me that Ashley was indeed a man, played by a man named Laurie.
Oh,
which
interesting.
is even more confusing.
Right, because you were talking about how it was like Little Women, where Joey didn't know the names Joe and Laurie were like unisex.
I don't blame him if it's out of context. I mean,
well, that's what we were talking about. It was like Ashley used to be like a man's name, and same with Laurie, and then Joe was short for Josephine. So I mean, things change.
Sorry, let me correct myself. Ashley was played by a man named Leslie.
Leslie, close.
Which, even more confusing.
I mean,
as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, that's kind of a gender neutral name.
Yeah. So I'm gonna kind of break down. I'm gonna go into spoilers pretty fast here. I'm gonna break down the film into its constituent parts. Seven parts I wrote down. Some of which I thought were fine. Some of which I really liked. Some of which I didn't.
Nowadays, this would be like a 4-parter series, like 1 hour each.
I was totally thinking the exact same thing. It felt like a mini series.
Because like every single hour was like a different period of Scarlett O'Hara's life, basically.
Yeah. So the setup at the very beginning, when she's like spoiled brat, just thinking about her potential beau and all that, I was like, I can't stand this. I'm going to hate this movie. I was like, not into it, not into this character, not into the story. I was like, I don't care about this at all. I am going to hate this. And then as soon as the war starts, it started getting really good.
Yeah. And we're just going to talk about like all the aspects of it. She becomes widowed.
Right.
She's a really funny widow because she obviously didn't love her husband at all. And she's just like, I don't want to wear black.
Well, yeah. So the war starts, people start dying, society starts crumbling around them. I was like, oh, this is getting interesting. And then the whole part where she's taking Melly out of the city to go back to Tara, taking her by like horse and buggy.
Oh,
and
yeah, that was really intense.
And there's all the burning buildings and explosions going on behind her. I was like, this is starting to get really good.
It's like a modern day. It was like a blockbuster of its day, like all the big effects, like tons of like fight scenes.
Yeah.
Lots of extras, grandiose costume design. Like they really went all out on this movie.
So I like those parts a lot. And it was not only the story that got more engaging and the effects, of course, but the use of lighting and color.
So
I was like,
good.
Around that specific point in the movie, I was like, wow, they're really using color to their advantage here, and showing these scenes in a light, pun intended, that you couldn't in black and white, because it just like adds so much mood and character to the scene. Like the reds that they're using splashing across Clark Gable's face. I was like, this is incredible. And then the rest of the movie, it was almost like the rest of the movie was DP'd by a different person. Just that like 1 hour stretch.
I don't know.
I was so impressed by it, and I didn't feel like that quality of camera and lighting came back later.
I mean, definitely before the intermission, it was the most intense. Like when she was like, I'm never going to be hungry again. And then it like went into intermission. It was like pretty epic.
Yeah, that was like a really amazing, powerful movie moment.
Definitely.
So we got the setup. Boring, didn't care. And then the beginning of the war started to get more interesting. And then the aftermath of the war, where she's like, I'm going to work hard. I never want to starve and live this kind of life. I want to pull myself up by my bootstraps and get things done. I was like, okay, yes, awesome. This is great. This is character development. It's motivating. We love to see it. She's going to forget about everything going on with Ashley. She's going to be like, that wasn't important. Other things are more important right now. She was jealous of Melly the whole beginning part, but now she's like, no, I'm going to save her, and I really care about her. I was like, this is awesome.
You think she's like grown up.
Yeah. And then the intermission hits. And at the intermission, I think, because we watched half of it yesterday, half of it today, we stopped at the intermission. When the intermission hit, I was like, I am jonesing to get back to this. Like, this is great. I can't wait to see what happens next.
It was definitely watchable. And like, let's say about the first half, she was definitely a spoiled brat, but I thought she was funny. Like, the way she portrayed herself, like it was endearing, like how bratty she was about everything. Like it was still a watchable movie. And Clark Gable kind of had,
a magnetism.
What's Richard from Friends? What's his?
A mustache.
Yes, a mustache. That's basically
That's the word you were looking for.
That sort of that energy.
What? Like, what do you mean? What energy?
I can't remember his name.
Just like what? Tom Selleck?
Tom Selleck, but also that other guy with the mustache.
You're going to have to be more specific. There's many people with mustaches.
This is going to be a really niche reference that maybe we'll cut out.
No, we're not cutting any of this out.
You know, at the Mayfair, where there's like a poster, Robert Redford. It was Robert Redford.
I don't know what you're talking about. What about Robert Redford?
There's a poster where he's like, Robert Redford.
Oh my goodness. This podcast is going off the rails.
Robert Redford.
You know when you're eating some Robert Red food and then you put some Newman's Own dressing on it?
Yeah. Wants to have your babies or something? Or no, I don't know.
What is the point you were trying to make right now?
The magnetism. Kind of like
masculine confidence.
Like masculine confidence, but like kind of cocky, like kind of annoying, but also very charming. Just kind of like, you know what I mean? Anyways.
Yeah. It was a great performance. And Vivian Lee's performance, I was honestly kind of floored. I thought she stole the show. I loved every second that she was on screen, especially once we crossed that intermission mark. I thought her performance was excellent. Like her stares and just her overall face.
She was so funny with her facial expression.
She was great.
Her character was.
But then after the intermission, you know, she starts putting Tara back together, and I was like, this is cool. You know, I'm still into it. This is great. And then she starts pining after Ashley again. Yeah. And I was like, you know, I kind of thought we were done with this.
You're in sort of Rhett shoes. You know, you're like, can you just give this up already?
Yeah, exactly. I was like, we still doing this? I thought we were past this. I thought we were focusing on more important things here.
Yeah.
And then when there was the shenanigans with Kennedy, I think what was his name? Harvey Kennedy, her second husband,
the merchant.
Started to get more into it again.
Yeah, where she was like a jerk and married her sister's beau out from underneath her. I was like, she's such a ruthless character, but I appreciate her strive to, you know, make money and like put herself back on top and like that drive.
Yeah, she did what she felt like she had to do.
Yeah.
And it led to some interesting stuff. I loved the scene where they bring home Rhett and Ashley and they're drunk as a skunk and like it's all a ruse just to get the Yankees off their backs. I thought that was really interesting. Really well done.
For sure. And Rhett's like, aren't you even going to ask like what happened to your husband? And she's like, how is he? And
he's dead.
Like, he's dead. I was like, oh, great. Widow twice.
Yeah. So I started getting back into it at that point.
Yeah.
And then she married Rhett and I started losing interest again. I was like, I don't really like, this isn't quality conflict. This isn't conflict that I care about. You know, this is nonsense.
Well, I didn't mind it because it maybe had sort of a When Harry Met Sally charm to it a little bit, where it's like
slightly.
They meet each other and they're like kind of frenemies, but then they like kind of like each other back and forth, and then they finally get together. Of course, their relationship never really worked out like When Harry Met Sally. But I found it interesting.
It seemed like they were just constantly flip-flopping on their feelings. Like in an unbelievable way.
It seemed like she liked him, but it was maybe she liked that he liked her. And she liked his money and the status symbol.
Just like her and Rhett and Ashley were just like constantly flipping on a dime. Especially in the early scene where Scarlett is saying to Ashley, like, oh, I could never hate you. I could never hate you. And then like 2 seconds later, she's like, I'll hate you to the day I die. Well,
it shows that she's a child.
I know, but she didn't have character development from that. Like later in the film, like way towards the end, Ashley's like, you know, oh, I've always loved Melly. Yeah. And she's like, oh, why didn't you tell me that all these years?
Like,
it's like
he keeps on telling you
every time you talked. Like,
yeah,
absolutely ridiculous.
She just kept on hoping and hoping. And I mean, I know what it's like to have like unrequited feelings for someone, but you just have to give it up eventually. Like it's never, I mean, it's what Rhett was saying. He's like, even if like things get your way and you do get to be with Ashley, it's not going to be whatever you dreamed it would to be. Like,
right. So there were parts of this film that I was really into and I thought was excellent.
I agree.
Style of filmmaking, and just like I was invested and I couldn't wait to see what happened next. But by the time they got to the end, I felt like they had fumbled pretty hard.
I mean, I think the ending is good. I think there's some
the ending is not good. But go ahead.
I think there's some melodramatic moments, how they decided to...
Some melodramatic moments?
Yeah.
It's just one or two.
It's a lot, but I just found it funny in a way. Funny how ridiculous it was how they decided to kill people off. Like,
go on, then.
Like their daughter, just like... and her pa. He just like dumbly like... breaks through a fence, and then their daughter, they just let her ride a pony like unsupervised with people nearby, and they're like, hey, don't you jump over that fence, don't you do it, and then she doesn't and dies. It's just like, what a stupid way to die.
Speaking of that, I had a problem on the scene that came basically right after that, where Hattie McDaniel is talking to Melly about how Clark Gable's character was having like a breakdown after Bonnie died. and she's saying all this stuff about him and Scarlett like yelling at each other and having this big argument. And I was like,
why not show that?
Why not show that?
That
Why
sounds
are we having
awesome.
Hattie McDaniel explain it to us? Like, this is prime example of show, don't tell. Like, that would have been a fantastic scene to see. But instead, we're just having it explained to us.
There might be a reason behind that production-wise, but yeah, that was really frustrating. I did love how Rhett loves Bonnie so much, though. Was such like an attentive dad. You don't usually see that in that kind of era.
Right.
Like a sweet dad.
So there was a lot to like about this. I can't call it bad. I was entertained up until the end. I did want to see where it was going. I thought the ending was pretty lame. What was your take on it? Because to me, it was like a non-ending.
Here's the thing: thought what I think would be more powerful is if it ended directly on Rhett saying, "Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn," and then like him walking into the mist, and then roll credits. That's always how I thought it ended. But then it goes on like an extra like couple beats, and I think it's weaker. Where she's like, "Oh, I'll have to get him back." I'm just like, "Well, you're not running after him. What should I do? What should I do? Oh, I gotta go to Tara, of course." It's like, well, just go then. Like,
not something strong to end on. My opinion. And
frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn is a lot more powerful because he's like, you know what? All this stuff has happened to us. Our daughter was killed. After all this time, like, I can't care anymore. Like, that's way more powerful.
Well, what's funny about that is during the intermission, not during the intermission, but when we took a break halfway through the movie, you asked me if I knew how it ended. And I said, no. And I said, do you? And you said, yeah, it's a very famous ending. And I was like, well, shouldn't be telling me that, but okay. Because I didn't want to speculate too hard on what the ending was. But then after you said that, I was like, okay, something big must happen at the end. And it's either somebody dying or some like famous iconic line or something very visual.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure what it is. And then as we were inching slower and slower, and by the way, I had heard that quote before, had no clue what it was from. Yeah. As we were inching closer and closer to the end of the movie, just the exact way that the final scene was flowing and the way that the dialogue was coming out, all of a sudden it clicked to me. I was like, oh, he's going to say, frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. I can tell he's going to say it.
I know. I was waiting for it.
I didn't know that quote was from this movie, but the way that this scene is leading, it is leading towards that line. And I can tell that it's coming. And then he said it and I was like,
he said it. This is a great moment. And that's why I think it should have ended on that. Yeah. Because Scarlett was such a brat all the years. And like, that's kind of what she deserved in the end. You know, she had so many chances to come around to Rhett. You know, I mean, he did some crappy things. He, you know, there's maybe a moment or two in the film where it's unclear if she had enthusiastic consent towards what they were doing. You know, she seemed
I had a question about that, actually.
She seemed kind of happy about the situation, but it also seemed a little murky. But it was the time period it was made in, 1938. I don't think people considered things the same way that they consider it now.
Well, yeah. So I did want to ask your take, because on the scene where he basically like drags her into his bedroom, and she's like kicking and screaming, the scene fades out and then we fade in the next morning. And she seems extremely happy. Like happier than we've ever seen her in the whole movie. Yeah. And I was thinking to myself, the only way that it makes sense for her to be this happy is if she killed him in the middle of the night and was like, yay, I'm so proud of myself. This pain in my rear is gone.
That's a lot more gruesome.
I thought for sure that's what happened.
Wow.
And then he waltzed into the room and he was like, oh, I want to apologize for my behavior last night. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
Why was she so happy? She was like pleased as punch.
Well, it showed that she was kind of into Red, at least on some level, because they had some kind of enjoyable night the night before. However,
I suppose so, because the audience isn't giving any other reason for her to be so pleased.
The problem is she's like so hung up on Ashley that she can't focus on Rhett, which
Yeah.
is not what he deserves. Obviously, he should be treating her better. But I mean, she doesn't treat him well either. I mean, that doesn't excuse the things that he did. But
so what I'm picking up is that perhaps the thesis statement of this film is like a lack of character development, like lack of learning, you know, not being able to follow signals and like point your life in the direction that you probably should be pointing it, and like holding on to the past. Well, is probably what they were trying to get across.
Yeah, well, it's I mean, the whole movie is about people that think civilization has gone with the wind because, you know, they're rich, white, privileged people that can no longer profit over, you know, enslaving people to do work for them for free and making money off of it. So, I mean, she's a privileged girl that is used to a certain kind of life from living in a very rich family, and she just wants to maintain that at any means possible.
I can get behind that as a thesis statement. I just have a hard time with movies that have a lead that I'm maybe not supposed to root for. Because I really wanted to root for Scarlett, but you know,
Melly was the G.
It was hard. Oh, nobody in that film deserved Melly.
Yeah, Melly was too good for this world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I kind of thought halfway through this movie was going to be was almost like pre-Deer Hunter, like Deer Hunter before Deer Hunter.
Kind of.
Which is a movie that shows like the horrors of war, but it shows it in like such an overt way that I just found it a little like blah.
It's less specific from focusing on war. It's more like that's the backdrop of this girl's existence for those years. It was like 4 years. So I think the war went, I mean, don't quote me on this. I think it went from 1881 to like maybe like 1886. It kind of like slowly petered out after the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. So it showed her like, you know, just before that, and then kind of growing up over those 5 years, and then maybe like 5 years after. So it's maybe like 10 to 15 years of her life, just kind of throughout the years of that change in American history.
Yeah. So it's more about how the war impacted people who were not directly involved in the war. Whereas Deer Hunter was like, these guys go off to war and they're changed men. It's like, well, yeah.
Yeah,
I didn't need to see like an almost equal length movie because Deer Hunter was also really long.
Right.
I didn't need to see a movie that long to get that if you go to war, it's going to suck and be horrible.
And it's pointless, right? Basically.
Whereas this, I didn't know that much about the Civil War, and I didn't know about who it affected. And yeah, we're not really supposed to root for the slave owners, but it's at least interesting to see all that crumble around them. And so I was really looking forward to seeing how her life would change after the war started and she had to pick up the pieces and rebuild herself. But she was just too focused on what her priorities were before the war. And I didn't find that interesting.
Yeah, I agree.
It is what it is. So now is time for Andy's Trivia Corner.
Yeah, I'm interested in this because I know some about this movie, but not everything. So,
well, there's a lot of trivia, and I could probably sit here for like a good half hour reading trivia.
There could be a whole documentary, I think, about the production of this movie because it's so chaotic.
So normally I pick 3 to read, but I'm just going to read like the first 5 to 10 or whatever because they're all really interesting. So the fact that Hattie McDaniel would be unable to attend the premiere in racially segregated Atlanta outraged Clark Gable so much that he threatened to boycott the premiere unless she could attend. Unless she could attend. He later relented when she convinced him to go.
Oh,
but that is just like
poor girl. She won Best Supporting Actress and she couldn't even go because of segregation.
Ridiculous.
Well, it's sort of the trickle down effect. That's the whole problem, like with what Black people are facing now, is because of slavery and because of this division when the country started. Even when they were freed, they were afraid that they were going to take revenge on white people. So that's basically how they were convinced of segregation. and why that still happened. And then even after segregation stopped, there was still, you know, a cultural divide between white people and black people systematically that is still being affected today.
Right. I'm really interested to read up more about this topic because, again, like in school, I was never a history kid. Didn't really care about that stuff. But now that we're able to explore it more as adults, you know, I'd love to know more.
Yeah, I think it means more. Like, it's different than just hearing names and dates. Like, just hearing culturally and politically what it actually meant and how it affected people.
Yeah, totally. So, as we said before, Hattie McDaniel became the first black person to be nominated for and win an Academy Award.
Yeah, that's amazing.
She was great in the movie.
I love that. She was great. I mean, she was a lovely lady, and I thought her performance was great. But she was maybe like a little caricature-y, like just kind of a little jolly. And like, that's lovely that that they had sort of a jolly character, but I just felt like maybe it just made like women of color of that age, you know, one-dimensional.
Probably.
I don't know.
I don't know if jolly is the word that I would use. She was more feisty.
Jovial, feisty, like just kind of, yeah.
She had energy.
High energy, yeah.
Right. So here's another one. Vivian Lee worked for 125 days and received about $25,000. Clark Gable worked for 71 days and received over $120,000.
Wait, Vivian Lee worked for how many days?
125 days.
Oh, I thought you said 25. I'm like,
no.
That doesn't seem right. Yeah, because she's in most scenes. Yeah. That makes sense.
Well, going off of that, at 2 hours, 23 minutes, and 32 seconds, Vivian Lee's performance in this movie is the longest to ever win an Academy Award.
Wow.
2 hours, 23 minutes, and 32 seconds of screen time. I actually thought it would be more because
she's in a lot of
the vast majority of scenes, almost every scene.
It's basically just like through the backdrop of her life.
Yeah.
For the most part. Fascinating.
Exactly. So speaking of that, at nearly 4 hours long, this is the longest running of all motion pictures to win the prestigious Academy Award for Best Picture.
That doesn't surprise me in the slightest.
Do you felt like it needed to be that long?
No, they could have cut some parts out, probably. They could have cut it down a little bit, or nowadays it would be made into like 2 or 3 movies as part of like Gone with the Wind franchise. Like, this is about pre-Civil War. This is about Civil War. This is about post-Civil War, you know?
Yeah. I did think it was long, probably too long. We did not watch it in one sitting. If we had, it probably would have been more apparent just how long it was.
Maybe if it was like a special day out at the cinema, you put on your best outfit, you got your popcorn, like it was like a full day affair, I could see it being a fun time. But watching it in a home setting, that's not the same as like watching it on a big screen.
Yeah. So I didn't think it could be easily cut down because I felt like the whole story was so linear. It would be hard to cut a part out and not feel like something was missing.
That's the unfortunate thing. There wasn't a lot of filler scenes necessarily. It was kind of all leading to some point.
Yeah. So I don't think stuff from the middle could have been cut out. I wished it had ended way earlier.
It probably could have, yeah.
Like, I wish she had some character development, learned some stuff, changed her attitude, boom, movie over.
I mean,
but that's just me.
I just don't think that's what this movie was going for. I think that's more of a modern narrative. I think back then filmmaking was more about when they did sort of biography movies. It was, you know, cradle to grave type movies. Whereas now with more biography life type movies, slice of life movies, it's a portion of someone's life. That was the most impactful stuff like that.
Yeah, too true. By the way, following this movie, the subtitles came in clutch because I would have had no clue what was happening if we hadn't turned the subtitles on.
Yeah, because of the southern accents.
Well, they talked really fast.
Yeah, that's part of it. It's sort of the transatlantic kind of thing. Girl, I don't know what I'm gonna do with you.
But like, I don't know. I've learned that this is like an ADHD thing for me. Growing up, there would be so many movies, too many movies to count, where we would be like halfway through the movie and I would have no idea what's going on. And it's because I would hear somebody start speaking their sentence and I would be like, oh, well, da 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 da, and I'll start thinking about something else and then thinking about another thought related to that thought and another thought related to that thought. And then before I know it, I've missed like a crucial 30 seconds of the movie where they delivered like really important dialogue.
Yeah.
And
like exposition.
So for a 4-hour movie, I was like, look, I'm not taking any chances. We started the movie 2 minutes in. I was like, no, roll it back. I need the subtitles on.
Yeah.
And that was so worth it because it was a fairly well-written movie, to be honest. Right from the get-go.
Yeah, for the most part.
Right from the get-go, they're talking about the war. They're talking about how it's coming soon, the impact. You know, they're giving exposition. They don't like... They don't faff around too much at the beginning. They get right into it.
For the most part, yeah.
And I remember thinking, okay, the subtitles are on. I'm following what's going on. How is this going to be relevant? And it was relevant pretty quickly. And I was like, good. That's the mark of a well-written movie.
They basically established that she's kind of a privileged girl. She's hung up about Ashley. She lives on a plantation. All her friends are plantation adjacent, basically privileged people, and then the war starts.
Yeah. Now, speaking of the subtitles, I won't get too specific, but let's just say the way that we watched this involved some subtitles that had some wacky qualities to them. First of all,
there's a lot of paraphrasing.
Yeah, they cut down a lot of what they said. You know, like if the sentence was like 15 words, maybe they cut it down to like 10 words and just boil down what they were saying.
I found that frustrating.
It was definitely frustrating, but in another sense, if I missed a line, it made it a little harder to get back on the horse a little quicker and understand what was going on by just cutting out the extraneous parts of the sentence.
I suppose. I don't know.
It's not how I would have gone about
I'm more of a purist when it comes to that. And I love, like, you can tell when there's a good captioner for shows like Wednesday had like very funny things in brackets, like describing sound effects and stuff, like guttural noise, jauntily macabre music, and like very specific stuff. I'm like, oh, this captioner gets me because I watch everything with captions on.
Totally. So I found that very helpful for this. But then the other thing that kind of put me off of the subtitles was the very end of the movie when, you know, it's this big grand sweeping scene and she's going like, after all, today is another day. And then like almost as soon as she finishes that line and you see at the bottom of the screen, tomorrow is another day. Did I say today is another day? Tomorrow is another day.
Today is another day.
The line at the bottom says, tomorrow is another day. And then almost as soon as she says that, it's like, please write these subtitles on www.
That was really funny.
I'm like, oh, you totally killed the momentum of this scene. You killed the impact, like freaking ruined it.
It was pretty laughable.
And then it stayed on the screen for like 10 seconds. I actually had to go turn the subtitles off so that I could enjoy the final moment, the final shot.
Yeah, that's the only thing with subtitles.
Insane. If you're subtitling something for free, like you're doing a fan subtitling of something, don't put that in.
It ruins it. Maybe I should just subtitle everything now.
Yeah, you should. I'm sure you got enough experience transcribing dialogue from our college projects. Ugh. Although I did some of those for you, to be fair.
Okay, to be fair, I interviewed 25 people.
Nobody asked you to do that, Hannah.
No, but I wanted to learn. Because we were in college and I wanted to learn about film.
Look, I interviewed like 4 people, like a normal student.
Yeah, well, you know me.
One of them was over email, so I didn't even have to transcribe it.
Yeah. I mean, I thought it was dumb. We had to transcribe it anyways because we were recording it.
It was extremely
dumb.
Completely ridiculous.
And we had to put it on a CD.
Yeah. But at least we weren't graded based on the aesthetic appeal of the envelope that we sent our project into, like we were in some other classes.
For a broadcasting class where writing should not count.
The envelope that you put a USB stick into, we were graded. Look, if you are the teacher,
an editing project,
if you're the professor that put that on the criteria, you know who you are. You know that was BS.
If we knew ahead of time that it was supposed to be special, then sure, I would have decorated it.
It's an envelope with a USB stick in it.
I mean, all it needed was the clear and concise information of, you know, the class, what the project was, your name. That's basically all it should be.
Well, maybe he was expecting a spritz of cologne. Who knows?
I would have given it to him if
If
he
he had
put that in the
asked for it.
criteria. Yeah.
Okay, let's get back in just a little bit more trivia.
We're just a little bit
of
bitter
Gone
over
with the
that.
Wind. Okay, so if box office receipts were adjusted for inflation, it would be the top grossing movie of all time. Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, would only be the second most successful movie of all time. According to the Guinness World Records homepage, the total gross in 2012 figures for Gone with the Wind would be $4,401,358,554.94. That's a lot of money.
Sorry, 4 million?
4.4 billion.
Oh, billion. I was like, millions
in
not that
2012
much.
money.
Yeah. Billion's a lot. Yeah.
That's a lot.
I mean, I guess it was a movie that like literally everyone went to see.
Like The English Patient in the 90s.
Apparently.
According to that episode of Seinfeld.
Yeah. And she hated it.
Yeah.
But I mean, let's think about it. Let's think about all the movies we have seen for this podcast up to this point. The last movie we saw on the podcast was King Kong, yes?
Mm-hmm.
It's miles ahead of King Kong.
Oh, yeah.
If I had just seen King Kong as a cinema viewer and then I saw Gone with the Wind, I'd be flying out of my chair.
Well, it was like 6 years later, but...
It is like night and day.
Yeah, 6 years isn't that long.
Color. And like the cinematography still holds up today. Like the shots are beautiful, especially in like the second quarter of the second quarter.
Yeah.
That is like some top peak cinema moments.
I just wish that had carried it over to more of the film. Like, it
well,
was brilliant.
It was sort of the backdrop of that moment of the tumultuous time in her life. It had more moody lighting, you know?
Yeah. I'm just going to rattle off some more trivia because there's some pretty interesting stuff here. Thank you for playing footsie with me under the table. I appreciate that.
I'm surprised you haven't talked about the famous line, frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn, because that was pretty contentious at the time.
Well, I only read so far into the trivia,
Okay.
but you can talk about that if you want to.
I was trying to figure out what it was called. I can't specifically remember, but before MPAA, I want to say it was called the Hayes Code, or is it the Haynes? I can't.
Hayes sounds more correct.
Hayes.
Like Hayes, I had in my head before you said it. So it's probably that.
It was like basically the MPAA before that, the self-regulated movie censorship board, and they're like, yeah, you can't say damn, and they're like, no, it's a very pivotal moment of the movie. Like it's, you know, how his character is ending, like being off screen, and like, you know, it's in the book, it's important, integral to the scene, and they're like, can you change it to a different word? Can you not say damn? Because it was like
we don't like it.
Yeah, it was a very big deal back then to say that word, but then they were able to convince them that it was integral to the story to keep it around, and it became one of the most famous, like, quoted lines of all time. So
probably worth it.
Oh, yeah. Like, I think it's impactful. Like, after everything they've been through all these years, you know, they married each other. They had this kid. The kid died. He's like, I don't care what you do. Bye.
I hate to say it, but maybe I would enjoy this more on a rewatch. Now that I know. I'm not eager to rewatch a 4-hour movie. But
I would watch clips of it on YouTube. Be like, oh, that was a good scene.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd sit down and watch the full thing start to finish. Maybe if we had like really cinephile children, be like, and then prompt them beforehand, be like, listen, this movie is really racist, but it's like,
that's a big but.
It is a pretty big but. This movie is really racist, but at the time that was considered like mildly okay for the most part, and everyone liked it back then. So just keep that in mind.
Okay, back to the trivia. Vivian Lee later said that when she, why do I keep adding when into these? You know what? I'm going off the rails here.
Vivian Lee.
You're gonna do, it's Hanny's trivia corner now.
Dun, dun, dun.
Go for it.
Vivian Lee later said that she hated kissing Clark Gable because of his bad breath. Rumored to be caused by his false teeth, a result of excessive smoking, which makes sense. According to Frank Buckingham, a technician who observed the film being made, Gable would sometimes eat garlic before his kissing scenes with Vivian Lee. That's really rubbing salt into the wound.
That ain't nice.
It seemed like by their chemistry that they actually didn't like each other.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
But I mean, they had good energy, but it was definitely, there was like a fire between them, like some kind of animosity for sure.
Right. So Hattie McDaniel was criticized by some African Americans for playing in a supposedly racist film. She responded that she would, quote, rather make $700 a week playing a maid than $7 being one.
I mean, fair. I mean, how many good supporting character roles for Black African why did I say Black and African American?
Because you wanted to really drive the point home.
Yeah. How many good supporting roles, you know, even up until like the last 20 years have Black women had in, you know, Oscar-worthy films of the time? They weren't given the luxury of being cast in big movies like this all the time. I don't blame her.
Mm-hmm. Okay, here's another piece of interesting trivia. The film has never been cut. Some theatrical re-releases and home video releases are longer because of the restored overture, intermission, entr'acte, if I pronounced that correctly, probably not.
Something like
and
that.
Exit music, not because any deleted scenes have been restored and added. That is fascinating.
Yeah, normally there's something left on the cutting room floor.
Well, it's just like even short movies often have scenes cut out for like a TV edit,
yeah,
or
some
something
small thing.
You know, like Metropolis was famous for having a bunch of crap cut out of it.
That's
but
true.
This at like 4 hours, they never bothered to cut anything out.
4 hours. That's.
I mean, I guess you're committing.
For a reason.
Yeah.
Yeah, the version we watched had the intermission and all that.
Yeah. Well, I could go on probably like for another hour on all these pieces of trivia, but I think we should probably get to a rating.
Yeah. I mean, I feel bad even rating this because a large part of me doesn't want to recommend it because, you know, it's revisionist history. It's racist.
Well,
but it's from 1938. You know, that's, you know, almost 100 years ago. Should we be really keeping the same standards for movies of that time as we do now?
I mean, I'm just rating it based on entertainment value.
I think
the key difference between like the racism in this movie versus the racism in, say, The Jazz Singer, which felt a lot more uncomfortable.
Oh,
was
definitely.
That in this, at least to us, I would say, it's pretty clear that they're in the wrong. Even in the context of the movie and like historical context, like it's clear they're doing the wrong
self-lost
thing.
Yeah.
You know, they lost, I guess, for a reason.
Yeah.
But in The Jazz Singer, I almost forgot about it because it's worth forgetting about.
Definitely.
The behavior isn't even questioned. Like it's at least partially questioned in Gone with the Wind. They're like, you know, why are you treating them this way? You should or shouldn't be treating them this way or whatever. Or like things are changing regarding this.
Yeah.
But in The Jazz Singer, he's like, yeah, I'm just doing blackface as you do. You know, nothing wrong with it. And that is what made it feel more uncomfortable.
Oh, definitely. For sure.
So that's why I think Jazz Singer is worth completely forgetting. But this still at least has some value, even though it's completely biased and at times ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's still, you know, it's like the highest grossing movie ever made. It's still worth analyzation.
I think within a cinema history context, it is a big moment in cinema history up to that point. Like it's one of the biggest movies made that I think is still worth considering and talking about critically, whether it's good or bad. For the most part, I enjoyed it. It was definitely long in the tooth, but overall, I was laughing. Like, I found Vivian Lee compelling. She was funny. She was strong. She was interesting. Her character was terrible. She was like slapping people around, very mean to people, but she was funny. And I thought Clark Gable was very engaging. He also had questionable behavior that I can't condone always.
No.
But I found him very charming. I found his relationship with Bonnie to be really cute. And I felt really sad when she died. And he was like, I don't want her to be in the dark because she's afraid of the dark. And all that stuff was really sad. So all that parts were great. The fashion was cool. I loved her red sort of adulterous look, like, you know, when Rhett made her go to the party after people caught her hugging Ashley.
Mhm.
That was an epic moment. She had like a red veil and like feathery sleeves. That was really awesome. And the curtain dress.
Yeah. But you were not on board for the tight lacing of the corset.
Oh, yeah.
You booed twice.
Because it's historically inaccurate, and, you know, I'm pretty into vintage fashion and, you know, seamstresses and stuff, and that is a very controversial thing, is people generally have the wrong idea of corsets, and a movie like Gone with the Wind is perpetuating that idea that women were like basically strangling themselves and like, you know, being, you know, bad about it, whereas really it was just an undergarment like you would wear any other undergarment. It's like if you wore your underpants 2 sizes too small. It's like, no, you're not supposed to do that. Like, of course it's not going to feel good, but it's like it was just a normal thing back then, like how any of our undergarments are now. That's why it was so frustrating, is like, well, would you do that now? Would you wear like really tight pants? Maybe, but that's not how everyone did it. Like, I don't know.
This has been Underwear Watch with Hannah.
Listen, clothing is important, and corsetry is also important.
Mm-hmm.
I think corsetry is great, and I think a lot of people that are misinformed and think that they're feminists or equalists or whatever, they think that it's patriarchal to wear a corset, when really it's the woman's choice about whether she wants to wear that undergarment. And I don't think it is inherently patriarchal to wear that. Anyways, I could go on and on about corsets.
I'm sure you could.
For an hour.
Corset podcast.
Yeah.
So rating? Do you want to rate it or not really?
I'll give it a rating. I thought it was enjoyable, but definitely too long.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't boring me out of my skull. So I'll give it maybe like a 7.5.
A 7? Why are you always ratings at like 7.5?
Because most of these movies don't live up to my caliber of films. Like, my favorite movies are, you know, Rushmore, Trainspotting. That's 5 out of 5 films. Dog Day Afternoon, that's like 4.5 out of 5. You know?
I meant,
like,
why are you rating it 7.5 on a 10-star scale? If you're giving half points, then you're rating out of like 20.
I don't know.
Because if you give 3.5, then that 3.5 out of 5, that's
7.
That's 7 out of 10.
Yeah.
But if you give 7.5 out of 10, that's what?
I don't know.
That's math I can't even do, Handy B.
The math ain't mathin'. I don't know. I'll give it 3.5 out of 5.
Okay, so 7 out of 10.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't mean to get into the semantics here. I'm just trying not to confuse our audience.
Listen, IMDb is out of 10. Letterboxd is out of 5. It's very confusing.
Listen, I love you.
I love you too.
So much. I would give it also a 7. It was surprisingly engaging, but it didn't go where I wanted it to go.
Where did you think it was going to go?
Well, like I said, I thought she was going to have more character development. I thought she was going to look at her past self in the early movie and be like, this isn't me anymore. You know, I'm not all about that. I have priorities to do. But ironically, she did look at her past self and say, that girl doesn't exist anymore. That's not me. But she really didn't.
She was a lot more ruthless and bitter.
Growth.
Yeah.
In a good way.
No. Again, I think that's more of a modern idea of films, to have some kind of emotional catharsis and like growth. Whereas movies back then, they're just like, hey, we're making movies. We're putting stuff on the screen. Let's have big, colorful, epic stuff and big dresses. And I don't think they were as concerned about really drawing the viewer in with having an emotional, impactful moment that they can relate to and that they can grow from. They're just like, let's look at some pretty people and have a nice day out. You know, I don't know.
Well, we'll see in our upcoming films. So next on the list in our journey through film history, the films that we missed along the way, is His Girl Friday. Only 1 year later, 1940.
I'm excited for this one.
No expectations for this one. I don't know who's in it. I don't know what it's about. Let's keep it that way.
Okay.
What are your expectations?
I know who's in it. I have a general idea of what it's about. And I have a perception of what the style of this movie is going to be about. And I am here for it. And I hope it lives up to my moderate expectations.
I hope it does too.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, I wish we could just sit here and keep chatting because this is a lot of fun. But
well, we can keep chatting off, like.
Yeah, it's just the magic is gone if the mics aren't here.
Oh no! We only talk to each other with the microphone on.
Yeah. Apart from that, our daily lives.
We're just
complete
silence.
Okay. Thanks so much for listening. We'll catch you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
See ya.